Hello, and welcome to this special edition of the NECC Sports Podcast. My name is Sanford, the founder and editor at Around the Northeast Corner, covering 30 schools across Northeast Indiana and parts of Elkhart County. That includes the ACAC, the NECC, and the Northeast 8. For this edition of the NECC Sports Podcast, we're going to be taking a look at the NECC tournament. If you have not seen episode 20 of the NECC Sports Podcast, I recommend you go back and watch that episode of the NECC Sports Podcast and then come back here to take a deep dive to the NECC tournament. First things first, before we can talk about the actual matchups themselves, I do want to make sure we briefly take a look at the history of the NECC. Keep in mind that this Doodle Dots can be found on the NECC Sports website, I believe under the history page at NECC Sports, the WordPress website that I've used for basically since its inception here. So let's go ahead and take a look here at the NECC boys basketball tournament over its history. Keep in mind that this tournament on the boys side has been around since 1967. And for the girls, it has been around since 1975. So just like the ACAC tournament, this is actually the 51st NECC tournament officially, thanks to some important information that's helped me to verify some of the early conference tournaments that were much harder to find in yearbooks. So let's go ahead and scroll down to the NECC tournament because we'll go ahead and just take a look at where things have been in the past for the girls basketball tournament dating back to 1975. Central Noble won the very first conference tournament back in 1975, where they defeated the Westview Warriors by the score 48-40. And up until 2005, Central Noble did not win another conference tournament until then. And since then, they had won 3 conference tournaments since 2005. So that puts them up to 5 conference tournaments. As you can see throughout its history, early on, it was a little bit of Westview in that conference tournament. Lakeland Prairie Heights would trade success in the late 70s, early 80s. But Prairie Heights really dominated the NECC tournament by the late 80s. From 86 to 1992, they had won the conference. Let's see here. That would be 6 times in 7 years. Lakeland obviously won it in 91. In that process, Eastside won it in 94. Lakeland, a couple of conference tournament championships in the mid to late 90s. Garrett would start finding success right towards the new century, as well as Angola would find success as well. And then there was some parity where we've seen different champions throughout the next several years. Angola would have a nice 3-year run from 2011 to 2013. West Noble ended their long drought in 2014. Westview ended their drought in 2015. And then over the last 5 years, it kind of looks like this. So Angola won the first 2 of the decade in 2020, 2021. Garrett took back the conference tournament in 2022. Fairfield had their first conference tournament since 96 in 2023. And then last year, Eastside dominated the Fairfield Falcons to win the first conference tournament since 1994. And as you can see here, Eastside is looking to repeat as conference tournament champions for the very first time. They have never done this in either the ACAC or the NECC. So if they get it done this week, it will be the first time that they would ever successfully repeat as conference tournament champions. Keep in mind that the Eastside Blazers have never won both the conference tournament and the conference regular season championship, at least in the NECC's concerned. And that's what's at stake right now. Going back to the boys real quick, this is if I remember right, this is the 58th NECC boys basketball tournament, which it dates back to the NECC's inaugural year in 1966-67. The first championship went to Albion Jefferson, which would later consolidate to become Central Noble. Albion defeated Wolf Lake in overtime 78-77. As you can look at its history real quick, early on, Noble County dominated this tournament, whether it was Albion, Wolf Lake, West Noble, most certainly, and then Central Noble had a tournament championship in 1970. And up until 2020, they did not win the conference tournaments. Then the LaGrange schools started to win the conference tournament, especially with Westview. Hamilton did win a conference tournament in 79, and then the 80s come along. Fairfield would get a couple conference championships in the early to late 80s. The 90s would be dominated by Angola with 3 conference tournaments. And then Fairfield, that 99 championship. Lakeland would have their run in the 2000s with, what would it be, 6 conference tournaments, 6 conference tournament championships. And keep in mind, Lakeland has not won the conference tournament since 2009. And this is going to be a very important year for Lakeland because this might be their best chance of winning this conference tournament, considering the draw, considering who they have back. Still a lot of juniors. They have some nice seniors back. They got a nice team, and they could win this tournament if they can have a nice week, but it's not going to be a given tournament for the Lakeland Lakers. Keep in mind that Westview did a nice run in the early 2010s, from 2010 to 2013. I believe that is the longest run in the history of the boys tournament. And then Central Noble had their 3-year run in the early 2020s. West Noble won it in 2023. And then last year, Fairfield partied like it was 1999 when they defeated the Angola Hornets. And as you can see, Westview has easily won more conference tournaments than anybody in the sports with 15. Lakeland comes in at 9. Fairfield at 8, the reigning conference tournament champions. West Noble not too far behind them at 7. Angola 5, Central Noble with 4. So now that we're done with the nostalgia of the NECC, let's take a look at this bracket as we speak here. So let me go ahead and switch over to the NECC brackets. Let's see if we can get there. Okay, I believe we should be good now. All right. So right here, what you're seeing is the NECC tournament bracket. So starting on January the 14th. So keep in mind the top team is the home team on this bracket, which is different from the ACAC tournament. Please do not get those two things confused. Keep in mind this is the boys bracket, so they are slated to start at 7:30, but the girls will start at 6 o'clock. Eastside at West Noble, Angola at Garrett, Busto at Fremont on the 14th. And then on Tuesday, the winners of these two games will play each other on the 15th. Keep in mind, the girls are going to follow the tournament. So whoever advances on the girls' side, on the top side of the bracket, would be the home team for both matchups. So that's something to consider here when we look at the NECC tournament. And then Lakeland's at Central Noble on the 15th. Fairfield will travel to either Fremont or Churubusco. That will depend on what happens in the girls' contest between these two teams. And then Westview is at Prairie Heights. And then on the 17th, the winners of these two matchups would face each other on the 17th. And then the winners of these two will play each other on the 17th. And then the 18th, the Westview will host the championship games. Game 1 is supposed to start at 6 o'clock. That's the girls' game. 8 o'clock for the boys' game. That's how things work. And then here are the consolation games for those that are interested in that. So when we look at the NECC tournament, I think obviously when you look at this bracket on paper, on the boys' side, and again, we're just going to go ahead and start with the boys just because the boys' bracket is shown here. West Noble is a heavy favorite to advance. They are one of the top defensive teams in the area, only giving up 43 points per game. Eastside has not won a game this year. They are 0-9. They have given up 60 points and only averaging 33 games. This is a rebuilding year for Lewis and his team. And honestly, Triv, you looked at their schedule, and I mean, their closest defeats, we're probably talking 12 points back on December 10th at Canterbury. I mean, that's probably the most competitive game they've played up to this point, and that was 58-46. So they haven't been very good at scoring points. They haven't been good defending people. New coach, rebuilding team, a lot of moving parts with this team. It's definitely a year of growing pains for Eastside. I don't expect them to beat West Noble just because the height of West Noble is too much of an issue. West Noble's defense will create some issues. And keep in mind, they did beat Eastside back on the 4th of January, 58-20. I'm expecting something similar to that this week because I don't think this is going to be a close matchup. But West Noble would be an interesting matchup if they were to advance. Now, keep in mind, with Eastside playing West Noble on the girls' side, it could be at Eastside, and that could matter a bit because if Garrett beats Angola, we're talking about a kind of a Garrett home game in a way, because even though West Noble would be listed as the home team, Garrett would actually have more of a home field advantage in a way just because of the fact of distance and geography for Garrett really is going to matter here. Now, Garrett comes in at 10-2. This has been one of the great stories of the year. 53 points per game under Logan Traylor. They're only giving up 41 points per game. They're winning games because of their defense, because of their rebounding. They're defending people. They're guarding people at a high rate. You got a really good sophomore transfer in Isaiah Keene, who's averaging near a double-double per game, one of the top scorers in the NECC. And they have battled through all types of competition, and they, for the most part, have passed through most of these challenges along the way. Now, they did lose to Angola back on December 13th, 56-44. Really a sluggish game for Garrett. Just did not look like themselves that night. And Angola played a great game. I mean, we're not going to deny that whatsoever. Angola was just marvelous that night defensively. But Garrett on paper does have the size. They do have the talent and the athleticism, at least a little bit, to give Angola some trouble in the first round. The issue I have with Angola is outside of freshman Niall Knotts, who's a power forward, they have struggled to find scoring depth from throughout their lineup. Now, it's gotten better lately. Tommy Caswell stepped it up lately. Ryan Stuckey did a nice job against Prairie Heights, and I love his defense. I love his energy. But Stuckey, I think at times has been a little quiet offensively. Good to see him doing well. And obviously, Coach Weber has done a tremendous job of putting in a system that has acclimated well for all the guys at Angola. Keep in mind, this is an experienced team from last year. They did play in the conference championship game last year, so they know what it takes to get back to that stage. These are two very good defenses between Garrett and Angola. I know Angola's given up 51 points per game, but I think a lot of that is because of the fact they did play Northridge on the 14th, gave them 80 points, and then they had the triple overtime game against Woodland where they gave up 72. If you just take away those two games, they're really only giving up right around 48, 47 points per game beyond that. So we expect this to be a physical, tight game between these two teams. And again, I think that matchup could dictate how the rest of this tournament goes because Garrett, honestly, with their size and their athleticism, and Isaiah Keene really is an issue for West Noble, I think, on paper because of what he does on offense as a shooter, as a rebounder, what he can do to get others involved. You got Parker Reed who can do some things. They're a very deep team. I think they're a little deeper than West Noble this year. And honestly, Carter Kaufman has resurged as a really strong combo guard for Garrett. I think Traylor has put this team in a nice spot in terms of competing for a conference tournament championship. And I think Garrett's a team to keep an eye on in this tournament. If they can take care of the basketball, play good defense, and maintain high energy, I think Garrett has a shot of making it to Saturday nights. But obviously, Angola is a team they're going to have to get through first. And obviously, Angola is very physical this year under Coach Weber. And the Niles Knots effect is going to be a factor here. And then Lakeland at Central Noble. If you saw the podcast, I did talk to Justin Carlson about this matchup against Central Noble. And I know you looked at the record. Central Noble's 2-8. But Central Noble is only giving up 49 points per game. And defense is a huge part of what Central Noble is good this year. They are not a very deep team, especially on offense. They are going through a transition year. They did lose some guys from graduation. And in the case of Simeon Guard, he did transfer out of state. Or otherwise, he would have been a big part of the Central Noble team. Isaiah Guard did graduate. Drew Pleat graduated. So it's still a decently talented team. But I think depth's an issue this year for the Central Noble Cougars. They are struggling to put four quarters of basketball together, especially on offense. It's kind of been feast or famine for the offense this year. Because, I mean, even against Bishop Dwayne, they were up, I think, 12 points to start that contest against Bishop Dwayne. And unfortunately, they just couldn't finish it off in the second half. Dwayne had a nice comeback in the second half. They beat them by 5, 50-45. But there have been moments this year for Central Noble where they've been competitive. They've been making their shots, and they were right there. Canterbury game with the double overtime, it was right there for the taking. They just couldn't make their free throws. They couldn't finish in the end, and Canterbury won by 3 points. You have the matchup against West Noble, 46-41 loss to the Chargers. That was a winnable game. They had an opportunity to win that game against West Noble. Couldn't get it done, right? And then the loss to East Noble. They were up 10 points in the first quarter. There were opportunities, even the fourth quarter, to come back and switch the momentum to Central Noble's favor. They couldn't make their shots. Just simple things that just were putting Central Noble back from being able to win these games. And I think what Central Noble team we're going to see is going to dictate whether or not Cole Kirkpatrick can stay on the floor, because he's got to be on the floor for Central Noble to win this game against Lakeland, right? Brandon Zolman has to be a difference maker for the Cougars as an all-around player, both ends. You need Carmine Schroeder to get hot from three. You need Nick Freeman to attack the baskets, right? And you need someone else to come in off the bench and get you some points, get you some energy, get you some defensive stops here. Because right now, I worry about this depth for Central Noble playing a team like Lakeland, who is probably the deepest team in the tournament, where you have Kyle Hartsoe, Keaton Merrifield, Levi Cook, Justin Carlson, right? You have Anthony Conchurin, a guy that we don't talk enough about, is Anthony Conchurin with his strong defense and some timely threes that he can put up. You got Kean Royal, one of the best Lakeland athletes who ever come from Lakeland High School. This is a team with incredible balance, incredible scoring depth. They are just a cohesive group of Lakers that Coach Schneider has built this season, and that's why Lakeland is in position to compete for a conference tournament championship. But for Lakeland, obviously, they're going to have to make sure they take care of the basketball. They got to make their shots. They got to rebound well against Central Noble. And the big thing is they got to be able to get through that first quarter. I think the first quarter might be a sluggish one, considering that Central likes to run a defense that does throw you off a little bit. It's a little chaotic. They can switch. They do switch. Sometimes it's zone. Sometimes it's man. You don't know what you're going to see on defense for opposing teams. And I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on, is how long can Central Noble keep this within striking distance with Lakeland. If they can defend the three, if they can defend the interior, I think Central Noble has a shot of pulling off an upset special, but they got to get off to a good start and they got to make their shots. That's the thing that's hurting Central Noble this year. Looking at Fremont Churubusco, this was a matchup that I think surprised a lot of people because of the fact the Fremont Eagles were favorites on paper, but I think little did we realize that Fremont did came in that game shorthanded, and Busco came away with a 37-36 victory for Busco, their second conference win of the season, which they beat Prairie Heights back on the 20th. And Busco's been a scrappy team, so you got to give Busco a lot of credits for what they've done so far. But Fremont, I think the big thing for Fremont is they're just losing a ton of close games this year. We're talking, 1, 2, 3. We're talking 4 games they've lost by less than 10 points. I mean, and then if you count the Woodland game, that's 11 points. So so you're talking 5 of their 8 losses by within grasp of controlling the game. And keep in mind, Fremont was up by 8 points against Woodland in the first half. So it's not like Fremont is not a competitive team here. It's just, can they finish these games? The Angola game, this was a game they dominated in the first half. And unfortunately for Fremont, they just missed too many free throws late in that game. And as it got further along into overtime, Angola just had a lot of momentum late in that contest because Fremont, honestly, I mean, you put in Colton Guthrie and you put in Katie Huffman and you got Ethan Grimm on this team, and Fremont does have a decent team. I think the question is can they put 4 quarters of Fremont basketball together, cut down the turnovers, right? Get some consistent scoring, right? And I think that's a little bit of an issue right now, is they're having a little bit of trouble finding the consistent scoring from Fremont this year, and be able to finish, because they're right there. They're right in there. And I wouldn't be surprised if Fremont does win Tuesday, just because even though they were shorthanded, they were right there in the end against Churubusco. So don't be surprised if we see Fremont advancing if they can get a bounce back performance on offense. So the winner of that match will take on Fairfield. Keep in mind that the girls' game will take whether or not it'll be at Fremont or Busco. If it's it doesn't matter, because I don't think there's not going to be anything that's going to have Fairfield getting any type of advantage whatsoever. So whoever has the home game is really going to be the true home team here. It's not like potentially having Garrett going to East Side where, oh my gosh, it feels like a real home game for Garrett's. Not in this case. But Fairfield's been an intriguing team because they graduated so much from last year. And it was one of the best years in Fairfield history. We're talking about a team that went all the way to semi-state, 20-7. They won a conference tournament championship, played tough defense against Delta in the semi-state semifinals, just couldn't get it done in the end. I think they were just a little banged up by that point. They played a more superior team in Delta, and things just didn't go their way in the final game under Derek Heinen, which Heinen eventually got the job at Leo. You look at this year's team, 4-4, first year for Brody Garber coaching the boys team, but this is his first year back after quote-unquote retiring after the state championship for the girls basketball team, where Fairfield girls finally got the state title on the mid stage. And we thought, will we ever see Brody Garber back on the sidelines again? Not sidelines, but back on the bench again. And lucky enough, he did not stay retired for long. And Brody Garber is now the head coach. He's got his sons on the team this year. So obviously there's still that family connection with Fairfield. They're playing tough. And as you would expect from the Falcons, they're playing tough defense. They're going to rebound. They're going to play hard. They're going to have kids. They're going to play with energy. They're going to play with pride. They're going to play with poise. That's what Fairfield's good at. They want to play tough, and they have played a tough schedule. They're playing tough teams. They're right there. They're in the thick of things. And when you look at this schedule here for Fairfield, I think the door's open for Fairfield to possibly give Westfield a run for their money in the conference tournament semifinals. So if Fairfield can get past that matchup between Fremont or Busco, I mean, you're talking about a scenario where Fairfield, I mean, even there's still a possibility Fairfield gets a home game on the 17th against likely Westview. And so, because I think we do expect Westview to advance here on paper. Granted, Prairie Heights has had a nice year, I think, considering where they were a year ago, where I think they only won 2 games last year. It was not a good year for Prairie Heights last year, but this year has definitely looked much better. They're definitely playing better defense, or more certainly better offense, and obviously seeing a resurgence from Casson Day and having a nice year from Jake Stoy. Cade Batcher coming back has made a difference for Prairie Heights, but I think it's a tall task against Westview, a team that perhaps has a little bit of bad taste in their mouth from the Westview game against Lakeland on the 17th. That's a game where maybe they feel like that's a game they probably could have had or should have had. And obviously Westview comes in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. You know, they haven't been playing great basketball lately. They had that loss to East Snowball in the 7th. Again, the loss to Lakeland. They've had a lot of time off between December 17th and now. Only 3 games in a span of 4 weeks. So now this is going to be kind of this change in schedule for Westview. But good thing for them is the schedule, at least the tournament schedule, really puts Westview in a very, very convenient path to get to the championship game, assuming they don't overlook Prairie Heights or they don't overlook whoever plays here. And especially if it's Fairfield, you never, ever want to overlook Fairfield at all. That's a rival game for Westview. You cannot overlook Fairfield whatsoever. They play way better basketball than the record shows. But if Westview can do what Westview does, that's making threes, playing tough defense, getting Caden Grau involved, getting Austin Slayball to attack the basket, right? Share the ball, play team basketball. Don't be selfish. Don't turn the ball over. Like, those are things that make Westview, and especially be able to defend the baseline. Like, that was an issue against East Snowball back on the 7th. They just could not defend that baseline whatsoever against the East Snowball Knights. And it really cost them the game for sure, which is they just didn't execute well on the defensive side. And that's going to have to get better if they want to get back to the championship game and get back to promise and glory and Westview historic excellence, right? So now let's take a look at the girls' side of things. And again, East Side, West Snowball at West Snowball. East Side's a heavy favorite. They're 16-1. I mean, congratulations to West Snowball. They do have 3 conference wins this year. All 3 of their wins this year are against their conference. So congratulations to West Snowball for competing in your conference. Unfortunately, you did not give yourself a good draw at all. That is a bad draw for West Snowball. I don't care. They're at home. East Side is just way too talented of a team. This is not their year for West Snowball. This is not their year. You got to love their promise. You got to love their heart. You got to love their effort. That's a brutal first round for West Snowball. So I fully expect East Side to advance, which means this could be a very interesting second round for both the boys and the girls contest. Garrett will host Angola on Tuesday, and this is a rematch from earlier this year. I believe it was right before Thanksgiving, where Angola defeated Garrett 64-40 on November the 26th. Now, keep in mind, Angola was in full strength at that time, and you had Lexi Stillman playing well, and Aspen Sun had a big game against the Garrett Railroaders. Unfortunately for Angola, it's been a little bit of a struggle of late. They've lost 2 of the last 3 games, but I think more importantly, the injuries are becoming a concern for Angola. Lexi Stillman doesn't look like she'll be playing this week for sure. Aspen Sun, it's up in the air what happens with her because of that situation there. They came into the Caleb game on Saturday a little banged up and shorthanded, so they're starting to play some players that normally wouldn't be getting those minutes, like Anna McClure now getting starting minutes, and Stockcamp getting some minutes back. We're seeing more of Kendall Holman right now. So Angola, you could not pick a worse time to be having to make adjustments when you got to play Garrett on Tuesday at Garrett's. And Garrett's got size. They're going to play tough defense. They're going to have Sarah DePew be an impactful player on both ends. Emma Kaufman's going to have one of those big games at some point. And then the size of Hickson, right? Delaney Hinson kind of matters here now because if Angola struggles to shoot the ball, the size of Garrett could be something that gives Garrett an edge here. And keep in mind, Garrett's 3-13, but they've lost a ton of close games. I mean, 1, 2, we're talking 3, 4 losses by 10 or fewer points. Now, they've had some blowouts along the way, but they have been close against their conference competition. And so Garrett's going to be in the midst. They're going to play tough defense. They're going to be a better team this time around than they were earlier in the season against Angola. And now it's at Garrett's for a big game against your rival school in Angola. Garrett could be a sleeper for an upset in the first round, all things considered, with Angola's uncertainty with the help of some of these players. And then Garrett at home, the size factor could play a huge role here for Garrett in that first round. Now, either way, I do think Eastside should be able to get to the semifinals. Barring just a poor performance, Eastside should be playing on Friday, which would be the winner of Central Noble Lakeland. Now, Central Noble did dominate Lakeland back on November 26, 55-28. I don't think that score is going to be that lopsided when these two teams meet again. Lakeland has played better basketball of late, and despite the loss to West Noble, 5-11, playing better ball as of late for the Lakeland Lakers. They're playing better defense. They've shown some promise at times to be able to score inside and out with Zoe Bowman and Dulce Canedo. They got another Carlson who can shoot the 3 ball as well. So Lakeland cannot be overlooked here. But if Central Noble can obviously play better than they did against Garrett, that's the big things. Don't play like you did against Garrett, and you have a chance for sure. Grace Swain's size is going to be a big problem for Lakeland inside. Abby Pleat is just a difference maker as a combo guard. The depth of Central Noble is definitely superior compared to Lakeland with Kiera Bolin and Cadence Bales and Taylor Custer. We could see other players involved in this tournament for Central Noble, but I think the starting five are seeing a little more experience, a little deeper, probably a better front court, in my opinion, than the Lakeland Lakers. I think what could be the X factor for Lakeland is going to be the impact of Zoe Bowman inside. Can Bowman be able to be a impactful player and get involved inside? Can they get some other players to shoot the ball well? If they can get the 3 ball going and get some steals, maybe this is a closer game. But I'm not expecting it to be 55-28, but right now I think CN will still be favored. Fremont will be hosting Busco on the 14th. This is a matchup where Fremont won by 25 points just a couple days ago, back on the 10th. And this is a team with balanced scoring with Addie Parr, Grace Charlotte, Maya Turner, right? Those have been the 3 all year. We might as well call the big 3 in Fremont, and they have been the big 3 essentially for most of the season. I think the one thing you have to be concerned about on paper is that at times for Fremont, the depth hasn't always been there for the Fremont Eagles, even though they got Claire Folk, who's a solid athlete. Haley Heller has had her moments this year for the Fremont Eagles. But beyond that, beyond those 5, not a lot of depth right now for the Fremont Eagles. And, this is one of those matchups where if Busco can put up a good defensive performance, Busco has some players that can compete here. Brooklyn Sinclair is one of the top scorers in the conference. Timbrook's starting to come back for the Busco Eagles, as she's played the last couple of games for Busco. Patty Wids has been playing better ball of late. The issue for Churubusco, kind of like with Garrett, they just don't close out games very well. This is one of the teams that just does not win close games right now. And if Busco can put 4 quarters of basketball, they can cut down the turnovers, get some shots to fall, get Brooklyn Sinclair involved, right? Get Bridget Timbrook good looks, right? Get some cohesive ball handling, cohesive ball movement against probably one of the more aggressive defenses you're going to see in the Fremont Eagles. And I think the big thing there, Busco, is you can't let Grace Charlotte get hot. If she gets hot, game over. But another intriguing matchup is these two teams have already met just a few days earlier. Fremont certainly has the edge on paper from a talent standpoint, but can Fremont put it together on Tuesday? I think that remains to be seen. And then you got the matchup pending against Fairfield, a rematch from earlier this year where Fremont only lost by 6 points, 37-31. I know Fremont wants to have that game back against the Falcons, who just recently came off a loss to the Eastside Blazers, 44-35. I think the big thing for Fremont is can they be able to score inside against the height of Fairfield, the defensive aggression of Fairfield, Madison Jones inside, Eva Herbert, one of the top two-way guards in the area. You got the length and the shooting of Michaela Mast in the wing position. I think those are things that could really hurt Fremont on paper. They're not a big team compared to Fairfield. They don't rebound the ball as well as Fairfield. So those are things to really keep an eye on. And the big thing is really can Fremont be able to score consistently against teams like Fairfield that maybe aren't the biggest teams, but they have the athleticism, they have the length, they have the depth, they have the defensive intensity that I think Fremont doesn't always have. And I think right now, even though Fremont could be at home, it's Fairfield's not going to be playing until the 15th. Fremont's already going to have a game already being played, so they're going to have some recent game experience coming into that potential matchup on the 15th. It's at the Cage. You never know with it being in Fremont. But again, it all comes down to, can Fremont rebound consistently? Can Fremont get that timely scoring against a good defensive Fairfield team? And can they just contain Madison Jones inside? Otherwise, I think Fremont may have another setback against the Falcons. And then you have the Prairie Heights Westview game. And that kind of caps things off here for the NECC tournament. Westview, 9-8. They've been kind of up and down this year. Offense has been come and go, but lately they're starting to get some success of late. 2 wins in a row. They've dominated against Heritage and Jimtown. And so I think Westview has to feel good about their confidence going into the tournament. But keep in mind that Prairie Heights is starting to get healthy, and getting both certain girls back on the floor together, that's a big help. Getting Bailey Gotze going is a big plus. And then Emily McCrae's been one of the best players in all of the NECC this year. She's 13 points per game. And what Emily McCrae does really matters for Prairie Heights. Emily McCrae has to be the gamer. She has to be the difference maker, or Westview will win this game. But their height is going to be a problem for Westview. The aggressive intensity of Prairie Heights will be an issue. Prairie Heights being a home is going to matter here a little bit, because because Prairie Heights is very good at home, regardless of their record. They have always been tough at home. And Westview has had their trouble with Prairie Heights scoring the basketball. So this is going to be a key thing for Prairie Heights, is can they defend the perimeter, right? And can Westview compete in the glass? I think those are 2 things that are really going to matter here on Tuesday. On paper, I do think the winner of Fremont or Fairfield potentially, I think, could be the 2 teams that could play on Saturday. They're the more likely teams to get to Saturday, as Westview's had their deficiencies. Prairie Heights doesn't score consistently. Busco just struggles to find consistency whatsoever. And the only 2 teams that I think have a real shot at this of getting to Saturday are Fremont and Fairfield, whereas the top half of the bracket feels very wide open. It could be Eastside's conference to win. Central Noble definitely has a chance. Maybe an outside chance for Angola, but I got to see something with Angola this week. The recent stretch has not been great for Angola, and then I'm starting to wonder, just is Angola maybe just a little too banged up at the wrong time? And that might be the one thing that worries me about that matchup against Garrett, is will Angola be able to adapt and be resilient against Garrett? I think that's a big question I have with the Angola Hornets, because obviously they have the athleticism, they have the kids, but do they have the depth needed for Angola to be able to execute and be able to defend the inside against Garrett's bigs? Overall, if I have to do predictions, and I hate doing predictions, I would say Eastside more than likely gets back to this championship stage, barring an upset. I think Eastside's the more likely team to get there. And then from there, I think the bottom half of the bracket, that's a tough one. I think Fremont is going to make this very interesting. They have not made it to this stage in about 14 or 15 years now. So they're hungry to get back on the stage. I just don't know if Fremont has the depth. I don't know they have the size necessarily to be able to contain what Fairfield's good at with their defensive intensity and their shooting, the versatility of their offense, the versatility of their defense. I think Fairfield just has too much. I think we're going to see a rematch, but we'll have to wait and see what happens there. And then on the boys' side, this is where it gets tricky. I think on the boys' side, I'm going to say Westview gets back to the championship game for sure. And then from the top half of the bracket, boy, I can see West Snowball getting back there. I can see Lakeland get back there. I can see Garrett. Man, can we imagine a Garrett Lakeland semifinals? Holy cow, that could be a really good one. This is going to be a close one. Ooh, this is going to be tough. I don't know how I feel about this. This is tough. Man, this is a tricky one to predict here. I'm going to go Lakeland, but not because I don't think Garrett is good enough, but I think Lakeland may have just a little bit depth. I think the shooting of Lakeland might be just enough to get past Garrett. I mean, Lakeland's size disadvantage hasn't been that big of an issue. And plus, with Cook and Merrifield, it's not like Lakeland's that small inside. So I think the big thing for Lakeland is be able to play hard-nosed defense, contain, if they were to play Garrett, they contain Keene, defend well against Kaufman, no easy buckets inside, limit the turnovers. I think Lakeland obviously has the team capable of getting to the stage. So I'm going to go ahead and predict a LaGrange County championship game at Westview. But boy, that Garrett team gives me a lot of nerves of making any predictions. They are definitely a threat in this tournament. I've seen them play this year, and they are for real. This Garrett team cannot be overlooked. If they can get past Angola and get past West Snowball, boy, that semifinal matchup could be very, very intriguing. But that's going to do it for this portion of the NECC Sports Podcast. Thank you, and have a great tournament.